Today's tutorial will be discussing how to change your visual properties in Revit. And what I mean by that is how you could change line weights, line patterns, colors, etc. for different building elements and annotation elements in Revit. And so you could see on my screen that I've already drafted, a plan for a house. And if we zoom in, we could see that there are already defined line values for our building elements. So our walls are at this level of thickness, which is different from our doors. And if we zoom in further, you can see our door hardware here is different from our plan swing. So we'll look into how we can adjust these visual properties of different elements so that you could present your drawings in the manner that you'd like to. And the first way that we can do this is using our object styles. Object styles are the global settings that Revit uses to apply to the building elements. So what you see now are basically the default global settings for our line thicknesses and line types for our building elements. So to get to our object styles, we go to our Manage tab, and it'll be at the far left here at Object Styles. And so you'll see this dialog that pops up with a lot of information. So we'll go through it slowly. We have four different tabs at the top. Our first being the model category. So anything that's a building element like doors or floors and walls will be in here. And you could toggle between the different disciplines. So right now I only have the architecture checked, but if you wanted to include structural, mechanical, and these other disciplines, then you would have these checked or unchecked. Okay, I'm gonna filter it back down to architecture. Now we have annotation tab that includes anything from, or annotation objects. So as I said, tags, grid lines, level lines, that kind of stuff. Analytical model objects, which I haven't really used, so I'm guessing you won't use as either as much. So we won't really look into this. And imported objects. If you recall from the previous tutorials, we looked at linking and importing external files such as Revit or CAD. And so you can change the parameters of how they display in Revit in this tab. So for this tutorial, we'll look mainly at model objects and annotation objects. And as you can see, we have a list of different categories that we could change their line weights, both as projections, which means it's not cut. We're just looking at it from above, and as cut, much like these walls. We could adjust their line colors and line patterns and even put a material on top, which I would not advise because, for example, if you have a floor, you're going to have many types of floors, and meaning you're going to have different material as your floor. So it's not as advisable to put a global material on top if you have many different types. So what can this do? Basically, it's showing us what are the values of our line types and line patterns for each element. So for my wall, you could see that I have a value of 5 for my line weight. And if we zoom in, we have a value of 5, which is larger than the door, which has a value of 1. So we can adjust these values to determine how Revit will display these elements globally. So I could change it to something like 8 and apply it, and you'll see that the thickness has increased, or I could change this to a lower value. And when I look at different levels, which I don't have another one, but if I were to look at a different level or make a copy of this, it should take on these settings in every view that you have in your project browser. Okay. So I'll go back to my object styles and we can do, a few more changes to this wall. We could change the color to say orange. Yep, orange. We can make the line pattern dashed.
So, sorry, Eric, one
Mm-hmm.
question. If, for example, we have several different types of walls in our building, can we go deeper in object styles and specify, like here in object styles, can we specify how different like types of walls will be like displayed?
Yeah, so this will apply to every type of wall. As you can see in my properties panel, I have an interior wall here, and this one's an exterior wall, each with their own types of constructions. But Revit will look towards these settings as like global, and that's why when we go into object styles and then go to our walls, it's just one category, so it's going to apply to all types of walls that you have. And I don't think there's a way to specifically manage the line types and line patterns of a specific wall in the object styles because it's a global setting.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, we've changed this, and basically now this is our default line type and line pattern for a wall. So what we can use object styles for is if you want to create your own project template. And what I mean by that is if we go to File, New, and Project, usually when you start off one, you can choose from a template that's already preset in Revit. So you can make your own project template, and within that space, start defining your line types and line values for different objects and annotations so that when you do create new projects, they'll already have these applied to it. So this is a good first step in trying to create your own templates to start off from. Should you know what how you want to present your drawings already. So now we'll move on to overrides, which are view specific. Object styles affect all the views, versus overrides are going to change these line types and line patterns in the view that you've selected. And to access that, you can go to the View tab, and it'll be under Visibility Graphics. So the shortcut is VG or VV, and I usually type VV because it's super quick. And we'll receive a dialog box very similar to our object styles, organized in the same manner where we have model categories, so building elements, our annotations, also again, analytical items, imported items, and this one I like is called filters, and that's where we can start to delve into how to organize different types of building elements. So Leo's example was, what if I had one wall type and a different wall type and I wanted to make them different? Well, we can use a filter to apply to that, and I'll speak about that quickly. Yeah, so now when we look at our image here, well, actually I'll go back to this one. This one I've applied with overrides. So as you can see, there's a little bit of a difference between the two images. So this is without overrides. This is just taking the global settings, and this is with overrides. And you can see I've made changes to different line colors, its thickness, some surface patterns, and also with the annotation objects. So when I look at my visual graphics overrides dialog box, I've made some changes, and you can see that they're reflected in these otherwise would be empty boxes. And we'll go through the different categories. So here we could toggle on the visibility of our um, model items. So everything's on except for like topography, parts, parking, mass. But we can hide some stuff. We can hide, say, our walls, our windows, and we'll see what that looks like. Now they're still in the model, it's just it's not shown in this view. And because it's an override, it only affects this one view, level one with overrides, and it doesn't affect what we have in any other view. Go back to the dialog and we'll make visible again our walls and windows. And much like the object styles, we can play around with our projection lines, patterns, transparencies, but also the cut lines and patterns. So for example, if I were to select my window, I can make the window cut line by selecting that box to something that's, you know, a crazy line thickness of 12. Okay. And that doesn't show up. I'll do another one because that might have not shown because we have a bunch of different elements within Windows that we can like affect individually instead of globally. So we could return that by typing or clicking clear overrides. And so that should return to whatever default settings we have in object styles. And we could change something like the plan swing. So right now it's at dashed, but we could change it to dash dotted, something like that. And then the thickness to 10. And we'll see what that looks like. So yeah, now that has changed, but obviously thickness is way too large and the line pattern is a bit too large as well, so it doesn't really show up. And in order for that to show up, you might have to change the scale of your drawing. So keep that in mind. You might have really great settings for one scale in a plan, but it won't necessarily translate into different scales. So yep, keep that in mind. We can adjust the, let's see, the floor pattern, for example. So usually when you have or create a floor in Revit, it's hard to even select it because there's no surface you're really selecting on the face. So if you had a pattern on top, then it's easy to select, but also easy to identify what material that floor is. So right now I've changed the floor into concrete, but we could do something like plywood on top, and we'll see what that looks like. You can adjust the colors here. I've chosen a light gray. And yep, there's two overrides for the surfaces. You have your foreground and background. So keep in mind if you have like a solid fill for your foreground and trying to put a pattern below in your background, then it won't show through. So have something like a pattern on top and a color below. I'll change this to like light blue. Okay, so you can see that has now been applied to our pattern projection patterns for the floors. We could do something like make it 40% transparent. So anything below, if you have another floor, would probably be seen now. And let's see what that looks like now. So we've overridden it, and because the color is a bit bright compared to the pattern, you can't really see it. So that's just something that to keep in mind when you're adjusting your line types and line patterns. It might show up better in a different scale, just like this. So say that I've made all my adjustments to my specific view, I'm happy that my floor is blue and my line thicknesses are crazy like this. And I have multiple plans. I have a building that's, say, 4 stories, and I want them to read exactly the same as I've done with this one plan. And because this is a graphic overrides, it's only available for this one view. You would have to go to the other views and apply the same settings with your uh, overrides dialog box, or you can just take whatever you've changed in this view and you can make a template from it, to which these other views that you want to have the same visibility graphic presentation can use that template and apply those same changes you made from this view into their views. So how do we do that? We'll go to the View tab at the top, and our view templates are at the far left. And first, let's create our own template from what we've just adjusted now. And now it's asking to name it. We'll call it template example. And now it shows up in our view templates dialog. Some items that are similar and what we've already seen are the VG overrides. So all of these, if you were to select any one of them, would bring us into the same dialog box we had when we were just adjusting the line weights and line patterns in this one view. So we have those items that we can modify, but also more based off the view. So these types of information like view scale, display, model, detail level, if we exit this briefly, you can find within the properties panel of your viewport. So here we can adjust our view scale, our display model, our detail level to that independent view. But now that we've created our template example, we can change the view scale, display model, etc. to be applied to multiple views. So for this case, we'll keep everything the same and then just keep our template. So now when I go back to this copy that we've made of our first floor plan, I can now apply the template to this view to take on the same graphic settings that I have here. So how do I do that? Make sure that you're in the right view. And when we go to our properties panel, it should be in identity data near the bottom. And you can see the first item is view template, and to which we have none. We'll select that and we'll choose from what is cataloged. By default, Revit should have their own architectural plan, site plan, etc. And you can, there's going to be different view templates for different types of views. So you have one for your floor plans, you have one for your elevation sections, one for your 3D views, and you even have some for schedules. So we'll get into that in another tutorial, but we'll stick to floor plan for now, and we'll choose the template example that we've created. So once I click OK, these should now apply the same changes that I've made to this view. One thing to note is that, or two things to note actually, is that when you create a view template from a view, it's not actually going to have the template applied to it. You're going to have to apply that as well. So that any changes you make to the template will now affect my level 1 with overrides view and my just level 1 view. Okay, so I'll make a change to my template just to show you how this will affect our two views. VG overrides model, so I'm going to change an element item. And for my wall, for example, I don't want it to be, I don't want it to show all this detail. That's just information that I don't want to be seen. So I could change my view detail to coarse, for example, and that should get rid of all that construction of it. And so I'm left with a blank wall, and all we know is that that's its thickness. And the second item about view templates is that if you want to remove it, say you click none, it's going to keep whatever changes that you had from that template as an override. So it's like you're taking it a step back. But if you want it to revert to something more default, like what you had in the beginning when you open a projects, and to take on those object styles, then I would suggest to have a template that just has those object styles from the beginning. So Revit has that, it's an architectural plan. Just make sure you don't delete it. Otherwise it's you'd have to kind of create it again through the global settings. So here I'm going to apply that architectural plan template, and now it has all the global settings that I made in object styles. Okay, and is everyone following along? No questions? In the participants panel, can you do like a green check mark if you're okay? And if you have a question, just speak now.
Hi, I have a question.
Yep.
I see. You did the pattern for the floors before, right? So maybe in 1 to 50 you can see it, but when you zoom in, you can see it.
Yeah.
Like when you export the plan, like will it show on the plan?
Yeah, it should show up. Just make sure that, so I've typed Control P to access the print settings, which is basically the export settings. Just make sure that you have things like your colors. So if you have it black and white and you apply a color, then it's not going to show, obviously. Make sure the colors are showing. And I think everything else should appear, properly. So what I could do is we'll go through it. We'll export this to a letter. We'll fit it to the page center. Okay, hi. And here, if you have something like shadows, that will be a raster item. So then the rest of your model on your print will also be rasterized. So make sure you don't have anything like shadows on, otherwise you'll lose like the vector properties of the building elements. And I think that should work. There's nothing else. Okay, and current window. So let's take a look at how that is exported. If it ever finishes. Okay. So in our PDF, it's a lot more apparent than what we have in our actual Revit file. So yeah, it might take some attempts to adjust it how it would look on print versus how it would look on screen. Here, the lines are much lighter, but in our PDF, the texture is a lot darker. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're exporting, is that the screen will not necessarily represent what it will appear on the print. So in this case, we would probably need to make our graphic a little lighter. Yeah.
Thank
But
you.
it should show up. There shouldn't be anything that prevents it other than if you have shadows, which might affect the raster, the vector output. Okay, and lastly, we'll go about looking at the filter item. So here, I do have a filter applied because although when you change your visual graphics for a wall, it's a global setting so that all the walls should take on the same line weight and line type. But here you could see that my interior walls are lighter thickness than my exterior walls. How I could do that is through a filter. So you can access that through the overrides, so VV or VG as the shortcut. Right now I can't access these changes because I have a view template. So what I would do is go to my view template in properties and remove it. So I could choose none. Or I could just make the change in my template as well. So whichever you guys prefer, I'll go to the template and we'll go to our visual graphics overrides filter, or visibility graphics, my bad. And you can see I have an item called interior. And this is like a rule-based setting, which I've applied. When we go to edit or new, we have rule-based filters and selection-based filters. I'll just discuss rule-based. So I can select different elements that require a rule in order to make changes to it. So here, some items like doors and walls are selected. Actually, I'll just keep it at walls for now. So anything else that's highlighted, I will remove. So the only building element I have now is a wall. And then we have our rule section here, which I've made it that the function, or you could even put like type name, has to equal interior. So when you're creating your walls, or if you're updating walls that Revit already has as default, just ensure that in the title somewhere there's the word interior. So that's the rule, is that it has to include the word interior for this to apply to our selected categories. And in this case, it's walls. So once I've made my rule selection, anything that's a wall and that's named interior can have these parameter changes. So I went into my cut section, and my lines are much thinner than what's set globally in our object styles, which is something like 6 value for the line, and we've changed it to 3. I can make it even less and apply more types of restrictions and constraints, but we'll keep it at that. Okay, and you'll see that my interior wall has now has even thinner lines than it had before. And so this is a way that you could have different types of families within the same family. So having different types of walls in your wall family, and applying specific line weights and line patterns to them. So was that easy enough to understand? I could go over it if it wasn't clear. Just let's say that in the participants panel if we're good. Okay. Assuming everyone's fine. And yeah, that's basically it. So I'll just run through what we went over. We looked at object styles, which is a way to adjust and modify your building elements, annotation objects globally. And what you could do with these parameters are create a new project file or project template, modify them to how you would like them displayed visually, and then save that project template so that you could use it for forthcoming projects, and knowing that these default line types and line weights have been applied, so you won't have to change it again. And then if you're working on specific views that need to take on different graphic properties from the ones that you've created in object styles, then we would head to our visibility graphics overrides, which is shortcut VV or VG. This dialog has the same interface as our object styles, except now we can make changes to the specific view based off their visibility and the line patterns, line types, and halftones and details, for example. And once you've created visibility graphic overrides that you're happy with and that you'd like to apply to multiple views, then you could create a view template from it. At the View tab, View Templates, and Create Template or Manage Templates to go through the options and settings for each template that you've created. And they will be view type specific, so make sure that you don't accidentally delete an elevation template, because I think that's the only one there and you'd have to create a new one or draw it from another project in order to get a template for an elevation. So don't delete these. And yeah, with these templates, you can not only adjust the line types and patterns that we've seen in visibility graphics here, these 5 items, but there are more properties related to the view, like scale, like face filter, knowing if it's an architectural project, that kind of stuff that you can apply to the template, and that could be taken on in multiple views. And lastly, we looked at filters, which you could take a specific rule or type of selection and make your changes to the visibility graphics for that selection. And in this case, we looked at how to make changes to our exterior and interior walls using a rule that makes a selection based off the name of your wall type. So it just has to have interior in the wall type name for it to apply, otherwise it won't. Okay, so that's the tutorial. Do you guys have any questions? Any questions related to like your project currently? Nope. Okay. Well, this again is going to be posted on that Google Sheet link, so you could view it on YouTube for your own reference. And then we have our help sessions every day, 3 to 5. So come by if you have any conflicts or design concerns, and then we could assist you with that. Okay. Thanks for coming, guys.